Hi, everybody. For this episode of A Guy with a Scarf, I'm normally saying I have the pleasure this time. Sorry for the others, I have to say, I have the honor to have with me Yiannis Exarchos, who's
Ciao,
the,
Carlo.
who's the
Great.
CEO of OBS and also the executive director of OCS at Prepareware. Ciao, Yiannis.
Ciao. Great to be here, Carlo. Really very happy to be seen here. Even though I'm a little jealous because you told me you're in New York, so you will be going
Yes, I
out.
am.
You will be going out places tonight and listening to music.
So, because we're both more expert in music, culture, men's fashion than
Correct.
really sport and sport tech. But today we decided to talk about mostly the Olympics, correct? But first, tell me about Yiannis. How come you're there in Madrid doing Olympics for a long time now? How did it start?
Well, my involvement with the Olympics started essentially back in 1997. I was at the time I was executive director of the Greek public broadcaster, and I was involved and I was helping the bidding committee of Athens a little bit for the bid of Athens at the time to get the games. So I went with them also in Lausanne because this is where the announcement and the decision was made in September of '97. And I must say that it's still one of the most emotional memories that I have for me, for many Greeks. And then it was a point in time in my career, actually, around the beginning of the 2000s, where I had been thinking of leaving Greece and maybe working a little bit abroad. I always enjoyed working in an international environment. As you say, I love music, I love storytelling, I love filmmaking, and a lot of things. And it just so happened that with Greece getting the games and Athens getting the games, that I had an opportunity somehow to get involved in something which was international, but also still important for my country. So what happened was that the person who was responsible for television on behalf of the IOC, Manolo Romero, a legend for our industry, a person who has essentially defined what it is to be doing host broadcasting in modern terms, and who had started working for the Olympics all the way back in Mexico in 1968. I knew him because at the same time I was at the Administrative Council of the EBU, the Union of the European Public Service Broadcasters, and Manolo was leading the sports operation. So we knew each other. We had some age difference, but I always, looked up to him. I admired him. I had a huge respect. And we had a good touch. So when the time came, he actually made the proposal to me maybe to work together and set up the operation for the coverage of the games in Athens. So at the time, the organizing committees were still responsible for what we call the host broadcasting of the games. That means to produce the international signal of the games and provide this coverage to the rights holding broadcasters. That was and still is a very big task. And the organizing committee turned to Manolo to help them. And they set up together a company which was a subsidiary essentially of the Athens organizing committee. And Manolo asked me to be running the operation on a daily basis. He was the CEO, I was the director general. So I left TRT on May 1st of 2001 and transitioned to the Olympics. I thought it would be a great gig to do for one games in my country. And here I am 23 years later, and this is what that especially to people that I like very much when they start and come and start working in the Olympic Games, to be very careful, because you may think that this will be for a short time. You will do games and you will have the experience. The difficult thing is how to go away from that once you get the Olympic bug. But I must say that I'm very grateful for this bug that I got. It is true that it's very difficult once you have been in an Olympic Games. So much into it to imagine many other things, because it's the energy, it's the creativity, it's the sheer size and complexity of it that's very hard to find anywhere else. Everything afterwards started looking a little bit yeah, interesting, but it's not really that challenging. Also, it was very interesting transitional years because, as I said at the time, the organizing committee still had the responsibility, on top of organizing the most complex event in the world, which is the Olympic Games, also to do the production coverage of that, which is the largest TV production coverage in the world. So that was a little bit too much. And the International Olympic Committee at the time realized that, had started realizing that this is probably too much of an ask. And this is why during this period of time, exactly, the IOC eventually decided to create its own entity and to fund its own entity that would be doing in the future the coverage of the Games. This is how OBS was created, Olympic Broadcasting Services, with Manolo obviously as its first CEO. And the idea was to relieve the organizing committee of that obligation, also to relieve them financially, and equally importantly, to ensure to the rights-holding broadcasters that they will constantly be getting a very high quality of coverage. They will have a team of professionals consistently helping them and supporting them, because the investment that they make is really very, very big. As you understand, this is strategic, not just for the IOC, but also for the wider Olympic movement. And it's interesting to say that the model of the Olympics is quite unique, because 70% of the revenues of the Olympic movement come from the TV rights, from the broadcast rights, from the media rights of the Games. Now, out of this amount of money, the IOC retains less than 10% for its own operation, for its own activities and so on, and the rest is distributed to all national Olympic committees, all international federations, and the organizing committees of the Games. In essence, the money from the TV rights of the Games fund the survival and the continuation of most Olympic sports. I'm not talking here football or maybe basketball or one or two very commercialized and very successful sports, but actually for the majority of the sports, these amounts coming from the Games is fundamental for their survival. And this is why this model is exceptional, and it was quite special. So after Athens, I left and went to Beijing. We discussed with Manolo what he wanted us to continue together, whether I would come to Madrid, where he was setting it up, or prefer to go to Beijing for the next Games in Beijing. I wanted to go to Beijing together.
There was a little game in Torino in between. There was a little game in Torino.
One part.
Sorry, it's my city. I have to play.
Absolutely. So at the time, after Athens, Manolo focused even more on Torino. One part of the team of Athens went to Torino, and one part of the team of Athens went to Beijing. In Torino, obviously joining local colleagues from Italy, and they set up Tobo, which was the host broadcaster for
so
Torino.
That Torino was the first one of the new model, basically.
It was not really. It wasn't,
okay.
because it had already started, because the
before,
model
obviously.
started. Yeah, because Tobo had already been set up. However, the truth of the matter is that we all knew that there will now be a continuity. So everybody who was joining knew more or less that this could be an option for us to continue longer term. And for us who went to Beijing, the plan was actually specifically that, to go and set up an operation in Beijing, because at the times it would have been impossible to do all this planning remotely, and that after Beijing, we would come to Madrid, we would join Manolo, and then we will start operating centrally out of Madrid. And this is exactly what happened. And it has proven, the model has proven very, very beneficial. And
Beijing was also my first. Beijing was also I'm sorry, Yiannis. Beijing was also my first Olympics. My first Olympics with Gary Zenkelp and Keith Miller at NBC Olympics. This is where I didn't start with Torino, which is funny, but we started with 2008, obviously before with NBC Olympics as one client.
But it's important to mention that, especially for younger people, to understand that we're not really that far away from what were pioneering days in terms of digital operations. You're saying
yes,
that it was the first games that you collaborated with NBC
yes,
on digital, 2008.
yes,
It was the first games when we did, as a host broadcaster, a little bit of coverage for that would end up in YouTube. It was just starting.
absolutely.
Facebook did not exist. So it's important to understand that those were really pioneering year for digital, that many broadcasters did not even believe that anything would happen towards that direction. They didn't really understand, they didn't care too much. But you were one of those people who were very driven by technology and who understood that this would happen on that space, and that sports would be a big deal in terms of digital. Things develop very, very fast, but it's interesting to remember these times from this perspective.
And very often, if you have the right clients with NBC, especially, they were talking about companion apps in 2008.
Exactly.
I think it was new in 2012, in 2016, almost as a concept.
It's interesting, a story that some friends are saying from NBC. NBC at the time was led by another giant of our industry, by
Dick Ebersol.
One of the absolute greats of sports broadcasting, and also Dick was skeptical in the first years of digital. He didn't understand where the money would come from. Actually, this is still a question.
By the way, Dick Ebersol, the inventor of SNL, just to be, as we talk about culture and wider entertainment, the inventor of SNL.
Of Saturday Night Live and so many other things. Again, a very broad renaissance break. But it's interesting that during the games of London, where NBC did first quite comprehensive coverage on their app and so on, and you helped them, supported them, that they one day went into the office of his producers and so on, and they had the digital team there, and he turned to them and said, "You guys on digital, you need to know that you have made your first $1 million. I don't know how you did this, but you have."
And sorry, just go memory lane. One thing that Kieran always told, our friend Kieran Quinn always tell me, that we were there at the I've seen in London, and at some point there was this huge avenues outside of the office. And we were walking, and we basically crossed path with Manolo Romero and Brian Ecclestone. And the two guys started talking, and Kieran tells the story that they both say, Carlo. I don't think it's true, but Kieran. But that was, I saw them and I say, wow, this is like 90% of sport broadcasting in 1 square meter.
It is true, and they were talking one over the other, and so on. And Bernie, he has kept on visiting almost every games and every IBC after that. I still remember, coming. He came and visited us. He visited me in Rio, and I gave him a walk around the IBC. And it's amazing, and I need to say that for a person that has achieved all that he has achieved in his life, has done all the things, it still resonates with me how driven and how curious we're about all the things we're doing, the new things, how you do this, how you do that. That at this stage, it's very, very hard to do.
To be honest,
I must say that Manolo was like that also himself until his last days. Unfortunately, we lost him.
But to be honest, even if you spend your career, and I have done it like much smaller than anybody else there, but in sport broadcasting, or when you walk in your, and I'm sorry, I'm not saying because it's you. I wrote an article called "There's Nothing Like the Olympics" right after 2008, because you realize, if you walk in your, studios and things, even if you have seen Formula One, Champions League, FIFA Cup, sorry, guys, people from this organization, it's like amazing. Obviously, you're curious.
It's big and it's complex. It's true. In Paris, just to give you an idea, we plan to produce 11,000 hours of content. This is like 450 days of content if you put it together in 17 days. And the competition itself is around 3,500 hours, and we produce almost 3 times that because we produce now so much more behind the scenes, alternative coverage, so much more for digital, for social media, even some stuff on augmented reality, etc. So this all amounts to 11,000 hours of original production. I don't think that there is a network in the world that produces that in a year. And that to the extent where it is actually kind of a problem for our rights holding broadcasters, how to receive and process all this content. And this is where technology has helped us a lot, especially moving towards the cloud and all the other new things that we're making. Otherwise, it would have been completely unsustainable to deal with the magnitude and the complexity of the Olympic Games. You compare the World Cup is another great event, the World Cup of football. Huge event, fantastic coverage, fantastic broadcasting from our colleagues and friends from HBS.
Yes, HBS.
But it's one sport, and it's it's 64 matches. The content that you have to cover is 264 hours of competition. They're doing a magnificent job, but some of the complexities of the Olympics are not there.
Yeah, because the number of inputs and the number of outputs, I think we're already amazing in 2008, 2012. If you can talk about a bit the evolution from those, I would say, initial broadcast plus digital to where you are today in Paris. How is it different?
I would say that today the coverage is probably equal measures geared towards linear traditional television and digital. Now here it's important also to take stock and observe a few things. The Olympic Games is still one of these few events and few properties, if you want, that have this unique capacity to aggregate very large and diverse audiences. If we have noticed, and I think everybody has noticed that, and every media entity is suffering part of that, is that we're living through a period of huge disaggregation of audiences, that it's very difficult to bring everybody together. People consume out in so many platforms, consume in different ways, and so on, which is on one hand a good thing probably for the end consumer. It's a big headache for the media entities because they have to fill so many different outlets, and also the overall value and the overall revenue generation is not a given. This is what speaks about the special value that the Olympics have for media, and a few other events. Again, the World Cup of football is one. For the United States is also the Super Bowl. Champions League aggregates general large audiences, but this capacity to bring together different audiences who are consuming more or less the same thing and consume it massively. I mean, they spend a lot of hours consuming it, not 17 seconds, is very, very special. So at the heart of what we do, long-form storytelling remains very, very important. By that, I mean the long-form coverage, because it's amazing in the Olympic Games how many hours are consumed per person. It's a huge amount, and this is why there's so much also financial value there. That being said, this is difficult today to be achieved only in terms of traditional television. And you need to take care of all the other different outlets and ways of engaging. And this is what we're trying to do, to create content for our broadcasters that they can use in all the other different properties that they have. Also, something else that I think is changing, which is a very, very good thing, is how much broadcasters in modern sports are interested in getting closer and closer access to the action and to the athletes who are the big heroes. And if there's something that I think will be noticeable in our coverage in Paris, is how much our coverage will go behind the scenes, how much we will be close to the athletes from the moment when they arrive in a venue, when they prepare, when they concentrate. All this, it's very, very clear that humans care a lot about that. It's something that excites them. Of course, we're in the Olympic Games. Of course, we need to be extremely respectful about these athletes. They're the best athletes in the world. It's a unique moment in their career. 70% of athletes will have the opportunity to go in only one Olympic game. So we need to be very, very careful. But I think this extra access, going behind the scenes, going closer to the athletes, will be one important element of differentiation in our coverage in Paris. I tend to highlight the issue of storytelling rather than the issue of technology, because I never want us, and I start from our own team, to get this the other way around. We, of course, in the Olympics, we have a lot of fresh technology, brand new toys, brand new things, but the Olympics, it's not about showcasing technology. It's about using what's best in technology to tell in a more exciting ways the stories of the best athletes in the world. And while doing that, to bring the people together. We shouldn't forget that one fundamental reason why people engage with the games is because they feel that the games have a value that goes beyond their sheer sporting excitement and importance. There's a reason why in the Olympic Games, more than half of the audience are women. And actually, it's one of the things that makes me constantly so warm and keeps on making me so warm with the Olympic Games. The games speak to everyone. We know that there are people who don't follow sports and they follow the Olympic Games. Every 2 or 4 years, they follow the Olympic Games. So we need, while we plan our coverage, to have all these things in our minds, that we need to highlight human stories, highlight the emotions, highlight the fact that it's the only event in the world that can bring together 206 nations. There isn't any other where you have this unique thing. And I think if you have a look at the status of the world today, where unfortunately we're going very fast again against divisions and conflicts and so on, there couldn't be a better moment for a great games to celebrate, for the world to come together. So going back to that, for me, all these elements are important, and technology is there to support us in achieving that, not just to showcase something which is cool. Actually, sometimes, simply showcasing cool things from a technology point of view ends up being redundant. And if you do it in the games, where you have 17 days of coverage, day in, day out, and so on, something that may look cool in the first day, by the 7th day may become.
I have one question on this. So on one end, you clearly have to plan like a lot in advance, right? I think it's an 8-year cycle, whatever. But on the other end, it's one of the places where a lot of innovation are used for specific sport, etc. How do you balance the tension between planning long but having the innovation ready for prime time? Obviously, again, 17 days, it has to work. So
this is an excellent question, Carlo, and can only come from a person who is so much into understand so much what we do. So I would say that the reason why we have the luxury to do things which are very recent, very up to date, is because of the very rigid planning. So once we secure the operation, as you correctly said, the operation requires a lot of time. We plan for production sometimes in venues that do not exist, that they are, an idea in one architect's mind about introduction of sports or new disciplines that had never been in the Olympics, or bringing them up to the Olympic level, of doing of getting competition places where sports competition has never happened. In Paris, we will have at the Place de la Concorde, a historical square that exists from the 18th century. We'll have 3 of the more modern sports. We have to set this thing up. So all this takes a lot of planning to make it successful, to make it very, very efficient, and also for us to help the organizing committees. If this planning goes well, and if we feel very, very secure, then we all have the luxury in the team to spend a little bit more time and a little bit more resources during the last year and a half into introducing new things. But also this needs to be done in a quite structured way, because again, it's not like you want to introduce one thing in one sport, maybe across different venues. You need to think the balance between the sports. You cannot do everything for one sport and so on. And usually the way we work is we start introducing in every games a few new things. We test them in a few sports, and maybe if they're successful in the next games, you see them expanding in many other sports. So it's a difficult balance, obviously, because of the way technology moves now. It's getting even more challenging. But for me, it's one of the reasons why I love the Olympics. For us, if we copy, Tokyo was a very successful coverage. But if we copy Tokyo in Paris, for me, it was not. It will not be. It will be a failure.
I always said that when you're perceived as an innovator, honestly, I always said with the clients we have, just because that's the mechanic of sports tech, you cannot go to someone and for the next whatever FIFA World Cup, Olympics, Champions League, propose as a vendor the same thing. It's like you cannot stand still. So you're going backwards, basically. You're on a moving path. That's a constraint, but also you're lucky because you're somehow forced to innovate, and that's why it makes it fun.
This is a very interesting point, because also that we have to navigate. We have on one hand our rights holding broadcasters who understand very well what we do. They have expectations. They are very professional. The media rights holders of the games are the largest media entities in the world. They follow things. They have increased expectations. They understand what we're doing. They're pushing us for more. On the other hand, that in the life cycle of the organization of an Olympic Games, there always come times when the organizers and the organizing committees, they have to roll back a little bit their vision and their ambition and so on. It's interesting that for us, it usually works the other way around. When this happens for the organizing committees, ourselves, we're at the point where we have secured the operation and we start looking for doing additional things. One key element, however, for us doing things is not to have a negative impact on the organizing committee. So not to go back and ask for additional services or additional infrastructure and so on. The way we work is actually the reverse. Through the years, what we're trying to do is to create space for new things by creating very radical efficiencies. And this has been helped by adoption of technologies which may not be directly visible to the end user, but which have ended up allowing us things that the end user can see, like our mass adoption of moving to cloud-based procedures in broadcasting. When we started that in 2018, around Pyeongchang, some broadcasters were very skeptical. Can you really use, cloud? You guys are doing high definition. You're now doing 4K, live, massive content, massive demands. Cloud is okay to store stuff, to the Excels, Words, data, and so on at those times. But we were very confident that it was a matter of time before the technology would really allow us to use it in a way that we could really scale our broadcast operations. And at the time, we had the hope with our engineering teams that probably by Milano, by 2026, maybe 18 to 20% of the operational broadcasters could be over the cloud. Well, in Paris, 49% of the delivery of signals will happen over the cloud. And it took, unfortunately, a pandemic for everybody to start adopting technologies faster. But by that, I mean that it's part of our thinking also for many, many years now, since after the Games of London, we started thinking about it. How can we do more with less? It's impossible that broadcasters, have to take over all the space, that we have to ask for so many facilities committees. So if you really look at it, even though the games have become bigger, more complex, and what we produce has become 2 or 3 times more than what it used to be, that actually our footprint has shrunk. The IBC
wow.
in Paris is going to be 18% smaller than it was in Tokyo. Tokyo was 20% smaller than it was in Rio, with
wow.
so many more sports that we have in Paris.
Yeah.
In Paris, the power consumption in the venues is going to be more than 50% less than it was in Rio. In the IBC, it's going to be 45% that one it was in Rio. Very, very significant reductions. This is serious for the footprint. Reduction of spaces, and this has been achieved precisely through the adoption of technologies, cloud-based technologies, virtualized procedures that we follow a lot, promotion of remote working. Actually, it's these technologies that allow for that.
Yeah.
That really have enabled all these changes. So there's a part of innovation which is visible. You will see in Paris.
Yes.
Things, like 3D replays that will be generated with the help with the assistance of AI. You will see more dynamic graphics. You will see things like that I think the end viewer will understand that those are innovations and pushing forward what we do. There is a ton of things that we do also behind the scene based on technological innovation that are not visible, but at the end of the day, they benefit the games and they benefit the broadcasters. We will have, for the first time, AI-generated highlights. Highlights is a huge deal in the Olympic Games because of the sheer amount of sessions and so on. Nobody has so many editors to be producing constantly. Well, we will be using a platform that will be able to generate highlights based on AI very fast in different formats, whether it's for traditional television, for social media, vertical videos, horizontal videos.
But for all sports or for certain sports?
It will be done for 17 sports.
Significant.
Yeah. Which is very significant. And as you understand, being in technology yourself, the difficult part was how to train the machines into sports where you don't have so much content out there, because it's one thing to train a machine to do football. Yes, there's tons of content. It's another thing to do that for some of the Olympic sport, and this is the complexity. But the beauty of it is that broadcasters will be able to customize these highlights for the exact durations that they want for the sports, with a national profile, with the profile of the different moods that they want, and so on. So again, people may not be able to see it, but they will see the benefit. They will see that even during, while the session is still on, they may start receiving already highlights of what has happened in the first half, and so on. So this is important.
You preempted my question, which was, and I'm happy that you brought it up. So it's not the obvious question. What about that? Yeah, but the fact that it's already happening. But do you expect that for the next cycle, this will be even more, will touch other areas apart from the obvious, create highlights? You already have an idea, or it's too early to understand?
It's not too early. For us, we have actually been working with different versions of AI for a number of years now. AI is not a new thing. I mean, the hype that it became the last year for good reasons, because large language models have progressed so much, but AI has a 70 years story behind it. So for us, it has always been obvious that there are some areas where we can get a lot of efficiencies and synergies. And clearly the areas, of management of content, of tagging, of archiving, of associating data with visuals are very clear areas where we can benefit a lot. We have a lot of parallel streams of work. We're doing, 7 or 8 distinct things that are AI driven. As I said, some will be on screen, some will be behind the screen. There is no doubt that AI will play a significant role in the future development of media. However, I think that after the first big hype of around AI solving all the problems of human life, I think also in media we have started realizing that in order to make different AI tools useful, probably we need to put some parameters, because a prompt on LLM may produce something which looks very much like it's being created by humans, but you put the same prompt again and you get something different. You put it the third time, you get something different. So lack of consistency is something that we don't like when we create things. Also, a lot of the models are based on original data information that it's very debatable who owns them and what is the IP right around that. So what I see is a direction moving forward to the future is that I believe we will see a far more structured use of AI tools based on a number of parameters that media, and I'm speaking about media here, that media will be setting to make this tool much more usable, really, and not producing so many random products. Random products are fun, but they're not good for media entities. When you want to do something, and if you need to correct it then 15 times before you can publish it, there is no point, you lose it. So I believe that many of these models will start in the future being trained by more contained, more rigid and more structured sets of data rather than from the whole internet. I leave aside the fundamental problems that have to do with the ethics, that have to do with the total protection of IP. You hear the stories and you listen already what's the discussion among actors, Scarlett Johansson, just a few days ago. Those are all very, very valid questions that the industry will have to face and address in a mature and responsible way. So we're not there in saying that this will change everything. I'm a believer in the huge capacities of AI. I'm also very aware of the incredible risks that are associated, especially on the ethical front. But for us, we will continue working. We have a luxury a little bit because we work in sports and we work for the Olympics. So our starting point is a starting point of an ethical effort. We're not trying to sell something which is strange here. We're trying to tell stories that unite the world. So we are in a little bit privileged point where we can take selectively, the best out of AI. You know that the president of the IS is a huge believer that AI can be used in several areas to promote sports and to help, especially with the development of sports. So I believe that the use of AI should become more selective. People should choose exactly what they want to use it for. Otherwise, they may lose a lot of time and a lot of money and get in trouble.
So one question on the media rights holders, the broadcaster, as we used to call them in the past. Are they? So I always use the model of freedom within a framework. Now you're creating a framework, and you're agreeing, defining a freedom. So how is it working now for Paris? Do they have? No, I'm guessing they're bringing less people, material, as you said, ABC, etc.
Yeah.
But is it different, the engagement? So how can they color their coverage on top of what you do? And how much you already color for them?
Yeah, listen, we're setting parameters, but as I said before, increasingly during the last years, we're doing our coverage in a modular way that allows broadcasters themselves to use different parts and create a product that's more customized for their own audiences. Let me give you one example. In every sport now, together with the linear international feed, we have a parallel feed, which is called multi-clips feed. This feed is made up constantly by different clips that we put in there that give broadcasters the options, first of all, to pick up cameras that maybe we don't use or longer length of some shots. Some shots which are fantastic, but for some reason we cannot put it in the flow of the sports competition. Follow some of their athletes longer. You have many sports like alpine skiing and so on. Yes, where you cannot, because of the nature of the format, follow all athletes from beginning to the end. But we give the opportunity to broadcasters to do it if they want. So our thinking is constantly how to create different content modules that can be used by broadcasters without putting them in the difficult position of them having to come and set up a production zone. And this is why you will see, even though the unilateral coverage, the coverage of the broadcast is exploding, I'll give you a few numbers, that in essence, the additional coverage that they do for the competition is actually being reduced, including, for NBC, who used to be doing a number of sports, a lot of additional coverage. Now they bring a few cameras only in order to stay longer with the athletes of their country. And then you have all the different cameras and productions that they do to set up shows, to do interviews with the athletes, which is primarily the job that broadcasters should be doing, and that we can do as well as they can for the athletes of each country. So I would say that I don't see that as a restriction to broadcasters, and I don't have the sense that there's anyone who would like to do something, or they have an idea, or they're trying to cover something, and we wouldn't facilitate it. But it's not happening. Our thinking is the reverse. How can we commonly produce elements that can be useful for many different broadcasters? This is, I think, the core of the essence of having a host broadcaster. This is why we were created, because it was impossible to have the television of one country doing this job for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that we didn't mention until now is Olympic Channel.
Yes, that was the original channel was a visionary idea coming from our president, from Thomas Bach. The idea is actually much older than people think. It comes back from '94. When he was a young member of the IOC, he came up with this idea in one IOC session. Well, the time was not very opportune.
Too early.
Many people thought that it was not a good idea, including some of the major broadcasters at the time. And also the technological possibilities at the time were not very conducive to doing something like that. But then the president included again in his manifesto when he was running for the presidency of the IOC, and we had a good collaboration. President Bach was a member of the board of OBS, so he knew the capabilities that we had developed. So he thought that probably now is the time to bring back this idea and to base it on the capabilities that we had created with OBS and so on. Obviously, I was extremely supportive of the idea. I also, at the time, we're talking 2013, 2014, I was looking also, and this was my recommendation, to open up more towards the space of digital. So not just a traditional channel. Yes, it makes sense in some markets like the United States, where we create the linear channel, or in China and so on. But for me, the big thing was to start extending towards the digital area. The big idea behind it was, and still is, to try and help a little bit with the very big gap that Olympic sports have between
the valley, we call it
the valley,
the valley.
flame to flame period, which is, if you come to think of it, a big problem, even an existential problem for sustaining a number of sports. Because what has happened is we have seen a huge proliferation of number of media, but actually this has been done on the basis of extreme competition on the same few sports properties, rather than the reverse of what people expected has happened. It's not like you have more space for all these other sports. Actually, many of them are struggling to find their space, and this is not a good thing. We know that many Olympic sports have an exposure during the games, which is anything between 20 to 120 times more than when they have in the World Championships. Not because the sports are not good, the sports are great, but because of the way the media market works, and because there's people cannot find the sports. So for us and for the president, it was important that the IOC supports the effort to bring engagement and to bring popularity and promotion to Olympic sports and athletes throughout this cycle. Of course, it will never be the same as it is in the Olympic Games, but to sustain that. And this is how this effort has started. We have come a very long way since the beginning. We have recalibrated also our vision. I think we have made it even more ambitious. And currently, we are executing the second phase of this digital strategy, which is a multi-pronged strategy. We have our website and app now, the Olympics.com Olympic channel, essentially integrated everything, integrated the traditional IOC website, but also integrated the websites of the organizing committees, which again, you know it better than me, was a struggle for the committees to set up such a demanding website that would operate for 3 months and then it would be shut down.
I remember well because I went 6 times.
Because you have done a couple of them.
I went 6 times in Tokyo in 4 months to convince them to do it together with us. So yes, I love that. I love
exactly.
that.
Now it's a given. I mean, a few weeks ago we launched the Games Time website of Paris 2024. If you go there, it's part of the ecosystem of Olympics.com. It of course has all the characteristics of Paris. It has the branding of Paris. It has the style and so on. But it's run by the Olympic channel, the content, the technology, and so on. And you can see already, you know, from the performance that it had, what a huge peak and increase we had when we took over. So the idea of aggregating all that and feeding it with compelling content that tells the stories of athletes day in, day out, I think has been validated. Now we have reached the point where the platform also is very successful in terms of reach. It's one of the properties, the sports properties with more reach worldwide.
How many languages do you have? How many languages do you have?
It operates in 11 different languages. But it's not only that it has different languages, it is that the experience in different parts of the world is very, very different. So you go to Japan, it's not like you have Olympics.com in Japanese. Yes, you do, but it's a different set. It's more geared towards Japanese athletes, sports that where the Japanese audience is more geared. The same happens in Brazil. The same happens in the United States. And the same will allow this system also with the website of the Olympic Games. So the experience for Japanese for the website of Paris 2024 will be an experience that will take into consideration their needs, their preferences, and so on. So you understand better than me how much work and technology goes behind it, how much creation, how many worries, and so on. So this is, I think, an idea. It's one of the successes, I think, of the Olympic agenda that President Bach introduced. I think it's one of his big legacies. It's also one of the areas where we have the capacity to be bringing back value to our top partners, to our sports source, especially with this traffic. Also, we have a massive operation in terms of social media handles. And recently, as you probably know, we have gone the way of allowing the distribution of some of our original content, the high premium content that we produce in different platforms. We have released both in our broadcasters platforms, in Warner's Discovery and in Peacock with NBC Universal. But we have launched also a very successful collaboration with Netflix. We produced for them 2 years ago the Redeem Team. It got the best sports production last year. We've just announced another 3 series that we're doing for them. And this route continues. It's very important for us because it opens up Olympic storytelling into audiences that many of the streaming platforms reach, and demographics that many of the streaming platforms reach on a constant basis. As I said again, during the games, maybe we don't need so much that, but sports need that in between the games. So this already has started being an important area of our operation of the Olympic channel.
Okay, so I kept you a lot longer than I told your team I would need you, but I think it has been a super fascinating.
You're not the first to suffer this problem by talking.
No.
Nobody has ever accused me that I am very short and succinct in what I say.
Same here, to be honest. But I have to say, doing this kind of interviews, and I'm doing different kind of it, I've learned to let other people speak, which is it's a bit late maybe for my age, but it's a good moment, I think.
And I understand how difficult it is in Italian, almost as difficult as it is for a Greek to let others speak.
Exactly. So what can I say? Thank you, and I will be watching Paris and on many devices like I used to do,
Carlo,
to see the good thing that you will be doing.
Let me show you a secret.
Yes.
Most people get in my office don't realize that, but I have this secret place where I keep some of my favorite vinyls.
Oh, Billie Holiday. Yeah, wow. Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Blakey. Wow. These I have too. Yes, I think I have almost all of them. This one.
I'm sure you do.
Yes.
There's some of my favorites.
Oh, see, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I also have it in my bag because tomorrow night I'm playing a gig at the club Studio 151 as a DJ selector in New York. My first time in New York.
And down there you see my turntable.
Ah, yeah. Wow. That I don't, yeah. My studio office has a turntable, but it's much smaller than that. Va bene. So.
Va bene.
Thank you, Yiannis. Good luck for Paris. Ciao.
Thank you so much. See you there. Bye.